today is all about this concept of a cult, good word or bad word, and the idea that you might be in a cult and not know it.
Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
Great morning, world. It's your boy Dragon coming at you. I'm going to file this under the realm of, at first glance, weird topic, but not what you think. You're going to enjoy this. This is a lot of fun. As a reminder, the whole premise upon the Rise Up with Dragon podcast or show, and just my whole thing is I just like to get people thinking. I like to get people to slow the process down upon which we create opinions and where our concepts live, and get people to distance themselves from their typical knee-jerk reaction where we create these ideas of what is and what isn't possible and all that. And also, just give yourself the ability to think about things for a little bit. One of my great, discoveries, and this is coming out in my book, is this concept of looking at things holographically, W-H-O-L-E. And what that means is to take a walk around things before you actually think you know what you're looking at. So today is all about this concept of a cult, good word or bad word, and the idea that you might be in a cult and not know it. So before I get into that, and I'll tell you how I came up with this concept, a lot of you ask me a little bit about the books that I read, and whenever this drops. So I just finished, some great books out there that have really helped me develop the interface response system. But I just finished this amazing book. It was like, I don't know what your favorite food is, but this was better than it. This book is called Emotional Agility: Get Unstuck, Embrace Change, and Thrive in Work and Life. Like, that's very Dragon, by Susan David. Trying to get her on the show, but I'll just show it to you. Susan David wrote this amazing book. Just super cool. And as a result, I always go on like a book scavenger hunt. And what that means is anytime I read a book and I dig it, it leads me to another book. So I have one now that's on deck, and that's the story of Viktor Frankl, and that's Man's Search for Meaning, which is like epic. I mean, you want to just quickly, what this is what I'm going to read next week. But Viktor Frankl survived one of the Nazi concentration camps. Just imagine what that's like. And he managed to develop the ability to forgive and move on. So this book that I'm going to hit next week, I'm going to share with you what I'm going to read this week. It's just awesome. Viktor Frankl says in his book, he says that, here's the key. He says there's a space that exists in between the stimulus and your response where all of the victories take place. So that's exactly what I'm always talking about. So Viktor speaks my language. So I'll hit that next week. But this week, she's in the clubhouse room. I want to talk about this book by one of the obsessed girls, as I call them. This is a book written by the amazing Tia Marie Morell, and it's called, the only thing about this book, Tia, is I'm going to read it really quickly because it's an easy read. It's going to be like an appetizer, like a snack, but it's called Obsessed with Mindful Eating. And what is the subtitle? It says, A Heart-Centered Approach to Nutrition. I love that. I love the idea before I even open it up. And Tia's awesome, and she's here right now in the clubhouse room, which, by the way, if you want to join the clubhouse for the idea of chatting after, just find me at Makes Sense. I love anything that's heart-driven. I think one of the things that we struggle with the most is we try to make decisions and create perceptions and responses with our brains. Our brains are very confusing, right? So our brains are like the process of succeeding at life and living a fulfilled life is very, very simple. What's complicated is us. So I love the idea of mindful eating, but I love that she says under a heart-centered approach to nutrition. So that's what drew me in. So that's what I'll be reading. So go get yourself these books. Emotional Agility, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and Obsessed with Mindful Eating, wherever you are, because there's people all over the world listening to this show. Okay, so let's get into this. See some of my friends here. I'm going to say hi to James, Dave Wanta, Christopher, Tia, Jules. Christopher, the amazing editor of podcasts and producer, and Angela. Okay, so we're going to get into cults now. This is going to be fun, dragon style. So here's a thought. So this all started with this idea. I was reading something and I was reminded of Spock. Remember Spock from Star Trek? If you don't know who Spock was from Star Trek, you're a baby, which is a good thing. So Spock was this like highly intelligent Vulcan, right? And he was like the guy that Captain Kirk would always go to for answers. But what was interesting about Spock that I was unconscious to back then is he was very stoic. You know, Spock was very unaffected by stuff. So Spock had a very strong kung fu in life. You know, his interface response system was strong. So I say we should all be like Dr. Spock from Star Trek. He has an amazing talent of being, here's the concept, completely neutral in his observations of his thoughts and feelings and stuff, right? So that's the first thing I thought was cool is this idea of being neutral, not jumping to one side or the other, black or white. Even when you're looking at your thoughts, he was very, very neutral. So his kung fu is very, very strong. He can feel like this is what Spock was able to do. And I was thinking about this and I was kind of like just giving Spock some grace. He can feel a potentially threatening, thing and just neutralize it as just a thought. Just imagine if you had the ability to do that, is to experience a feeling or perceive a thought that you're having and be able to step outside of it and just observe it as a feeling or a thought. Well, Spock did that like on autopilot. Like, here's an example of something Spock would do. He would say to Captain Kirk, he would say, "Captain, I just had a thought that I'm being undermined by a rival alien. How interesting," right? So I just, first of all, I want to give you that. If you can take anything from Spock, that's one of the things that he was really good at. And I think everybody can benefit from something like that. So I started with that because I believe much of our challenge as humans, this is how I got into the cult thing. I know that's crazy. Much of our challenge as humans lie with our inability to do what Spock does, and how we quickly place values on ideas, feelings, and thoughts before knowing much about them, before actually checking the facts and things like that. Now, it's not our fault. It's in our programming, and I talk about that all the time. Remember, your analytical mind and your machine of perceiving things was not created by you. It was created by your experience and everything that you've consumed. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's not your fault, right? Your programming, is what's going on. But it's an inefficient. It's inefficient for us and those that might be impacted by it. So that's why we would want to become open to change. We don't look at some of these things that we hypothetically do wrong. What we do is we just ask, are they working? Are they helping me or not? So I picked this topic that I feel gets us confused very often in our observation, and that is this observation of what a cult is. So think about the word cult for a second. So if I was to ask you, is that a good word or a bad word? Most commonly, if you tried to get a little fancy and you wanted to, impress the dragon, you'd say, well, I don't know. Or you use my technique and say, but for the most part, I think that it carries a negative connotation. You think about like David Koresh or, Son of Sam, and just, Helter Skelter, and all that stuff, right? So, I mean, like, I know a lot of friends that, couldn't handle life, including family members, and are in what I was taught was a cult, right? So for me, it carries a negative connotation. So there are well-defined parameters and characteristics of a cult leader. And that's what I want to share with you, because I actually did a little bit of research and I saw a show on this. This is really interesting. And I want you got to be open to this. Remember, I'm not giving any opinions. I'm just looking for information. And when I find interesting information, I'm sharing it with you. So when you look at the idea of what defines a cult and a cult leader, here are some well-defined characteristics. This is pretty cool. He or she has there's a charismatic leader associated with a cult, right? So think about that for a second. For a cult, there has to be a charismatic leader. And what a charismatic leader is somebody that's good at communicating with others, instilling trust, right? And getting people to believe in them. Because from the outside in, sometimes we'll see people talking about things that, like, as far as you know, don't exist. Like the idea of like getting saved by a spaceship taking you to another planet. So you need a charismatic leader, for one thing, because people aren't stupid. They can be persuaded, but they're not stupid. So they need somebody they can relate to. And then also, to define a cult, there has to be some sort of indoctrination program. Now you'll see where I'm going with this. And what that means is there has to be some sort of a system of being indoctrinated into it, which you should be starting to wonder if you're in a cult. Because, like, even if you're following Dragon, I would say I'm a bit charismatic. And how would you get indoctrinated into my system? Well, maybe you'd sign up for my 15 days of discipline, or come to hear me speak, or quote unquote follow me, right? So just be aware of this stuff. So there's the second thing: charismatic leader, indoctrination program. And then also what defines a cult is it carries some type of exploitation, right? And what that means is it depicts that there's an enemy, right? So like, let's look at me. Let's pretend that I'm a cult leader for a second. I always talk about this interface response system, building a better response. So what would be my enemy? My enemy would be your programming, right? I'd always talk about it's not your fault, it's your programming. So, I have some sort of exploitation, like I'm exploiting that there's an enemy, right? And there's rules. So if I depict a system, like my friend Jim Quick teaches people how to speed read and how to learn better. So his enemy would be, the things that hold you back from that. And then there's some sort of a rule that says, like, if you do this, you'll win. If you don't, you won't. So this is a little culty, right? And that's scary. So think about that for a second. Those are some of the characteristics that make a cult. Are you in a cult? Now, first of all, don't associate that with a bad thing. Just associate, it's kind of fun to say, yeah, I'm totally in a cult, right? Because I've been involved in things before, like chiropractic, for instance. Chiropractic has charismatic leaders. There's definitely a science, and there's rules behind it. There's an indoctrination process. I had to go to school to get into it and pass my exams and stuff. And then once I got out, I very often was approached by people saying, this is a little bit culty, all your beliefs. One of the things that stimulates somebody claiming that you're in a cult, I think, is and this message goes out to the obsessed girls, when you're not obsessed with something, or you're obsessed with something else, and you claim somebody is obsessed with something other than you are. Or if you're not obsessed, you'll look at somebody that's obsessed and say, Jesus, it's a little culty. And I think that it's a fear-based thing. If I ever claim that somebody's in a cult, I think that's a fear-based thing. But it also stems from my concern that maybe I'm wrong and I'm making mistakes, and I'm afraid that if somebody pulls away from me and pulls ahead, it might exploit the fact that I'm doing something wrong. So it's very fascinating. So have you ever blamed or shamed somebody? Now that doesn't have to be like to their face, because most of the time when we blame or shame people, it happens in our brains. Have you ever blamed or shamed somebody else for being in a cult, right? if you're like devout and religious, you would probably maybe not use the word cult, but you might look at somebody that's in something else and kind of look at them as if it's a little culty. Is theirs worse than yours? So there's that comparison. I think that when we're fully dedicated to something and we notice somebody is fully dedicated to something else, I think part of our programming is to look at it that way. Now, a lot of people express and practice a lot of emotional intelligence and emotional agility. That's what I love about emotional agility. To be agile means to loosen up, right? But it's still interesting to just look at how you observe someone doing something differently than you have committed yourself to do. Or are you upset with those people for choosing something different than yours? Sometimes what I'll notice, if I'm being transparent, if I'm fully committed to something, I have to buy into it fully to the point, and I talked about this with love, with chicken. I've actually taken the idea that chicken's the one and I've put it into my permanent program. That's a full-on commitment, right? Meaning there's nothing else. There never will be or anything. That's a full-on commitment, right? So if somebody tells me one day that I'm wrong, of course I'm going to be adverse to that because I'm fully committed to it. Now, if I use the interface response system and I develop my Kung Fu, I'll be able to manage through it and not get involved in things. But sometimes we get upset that people are doing things differently than we are. I know as a health coach, I went through phases because I lost 80 pounds and I got healthy, and I all of a sudden just woke up and established, this is why I'm reading Tia's book, I established this huge love and passion for healthy living. And I found myself sometimes telling people in my early days before I worked on myself and I did the work, I found myself telling people that didn't live that way that they were going to die. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if I'm open to it, I probably was scared of those people because they were doing something differently than I committed to. So here's what's interesting about the concept of cults. And I just think it's a cool word because it kind of ruffles feathers. It's a value judgment rather than a functional word. So think about what that means. It's not an actual functional word. You can't just use it loosely. You have to understand that it's attached to a value that you have. And where do your values come from? They come from your program, right? And all the things that you're doing with regularity. So it's interesting. It's a value judgment rather than a functional word. What I love about that, when I wrote that down, I said, a lot of the things that I talk about, like I'm talking about now, some of my value judgments are coming out. And a lot of the things that I say are either one of the most important things that I can ever hear from my audience, my followers, is when they say to me, hey, I like what you said, it made sense. Even better than that is when they say, hey, what you said really helped me. Because what they're saying is that they agree with my values. But I have to remind myself sometimes that I might be wrong. And that's why whenever I say something on stage or whatever, I always invite people to release it as fact. I don't want to be the person that convinces someone of something. And we'll get into that concept of leading others in a second. So it's fascinating, right? Value judgment rather than actually a functional word. So what fascinates me in my work is where people say that something like a cult, and there's many different versions of how you can interpret this, say that a cult is bad, but then they use a different word, religion, and say that it's good, right? But if I go back to the parameters, now remember, I'm an observer. I'm not sharing an opinion. I'm an observer. And I'm saying, well, what religion, right? And then I say, okay, there's a charismatic leader, there's an indoctrination program, and there's some form of exploitation of the other side, the evil side. And if you break the rules, you're a rule breaker. So I start to say, what's the difference, right? Now, I'm not jumping on one side or the other, but it sure makes me curious. And one of the things that I'm offering everybody in my show, my podcast, is I just want you guys to get curious. I don't want you to lean on one side, but the moment you get curious, you access the conscious part of your brain, and there's a lot of value to that. So how does one learn to accept a religion? Think about this. Step outside of your emotional attachment to whatever it is that you believe in. It's basically, the concept is basically that you live in a culty kind of a way over time, right? And if you live in a culty way, meaning you follow your charismatic leader, you do take the indoctrination program, and then you learn the exploitation and you follow the rules. That's what I mean. It's like cult plus time equals religion. So the day that I claim this is my religion, and I can look at that and say, Chicken and I claim that we're Buddhists, right? So how do we come to that conclusion? I know, because I'm using my work, I know that what I really am saying is we dig it, it vibes with us. But when I say that I am something, I had to go through some sort of time period living a little culty. I just laugh at this stuff. So now, if I'm in a religion and I believe in it with my whole heart, I feel anger and frustration. If I'm fully committed, anger and frustration if I hear someone say that it's a cult. So here's one of the downsides of blame and shame from one person to the other, is if I'm talking to somebody and they tell me what their belief system is, even if in my brain I process it with my stress response system and I say, man, this person is nuts in my brain, right? What's the value in me telling them that they're wrong and I'm right? So first of all, part of that is me wanting to put them down, which probably is an attempt to make me feel better about myself. But another part of it is that I'm probably somewhere afraid that maybe they're right and I'm wrong, especially when I hear someone say something crazy. Like, I don't want to wake up one day and find out that I'm supposed to be crazy, right? So it's just fascinating. And once again, I'm just offering you the ability to become conscious of this stuff. So it makes sense, as we all need to protect our position and beliefs in this normal reality. The truth about the truth is we claim to seek the truth, but if we actually knew the truth about everything, I'm not sure we could actually handle it. I think that if you want to talk about being afraid of being overwhelmed, if you knew the truth about everything, I think you'd be overwhelmed by it, and I don't know if you could handle it. So how do you protect yourself from that? Well, you just protect your position. You say, this is what is, and I'm standing for it. So whenever I see somebody stand for something using the interface response system, I look at it and I go, yeah, I understand. I understand what's happening here, and I appreciate it, respect it, right? Whew, good stuff. So how do we create our reality? This is fun. Here's another formula. If you're not driving and you have a pen, just write this down and marinate on it for a day. So how is it that we actually create our reality? Because you can actually recreate your reality. So I got a formula. Consumption plus time equals reality. So if that's true, what that's saying is whatever we consume with regularity over time, now this is where habituation takes place, whatever I consume with regularity over time becomes my new normal, my reality. So if that's true, that's a breakthrough, because whatever you desire your reality to be, it means all you need to do is things that support it and leverage it over time. And then not only will you have it, you'll be it. So what's the struggle? If we know that's true, and I think everybody that hears that says, yeah, if I do things that support and leverage what I want over time, not only will I achieve it, but I'll be it. It'll be my new reality. It'll be the new thing that you've loaded into your permanent program. That's what's cool about a habit. If you create a habit that's good for you, how cool is it to think about doing something unconsciously, meaning you don't even know that you're doing things that are good for you? That's the way you leverage success. So consumption, remember, is defined as information or an external stimulus received and accepted. Because there's some things that I consume and I deny. I say, no, I don't like that. I hold it out. That's part of the interface response system is deciding, like the bouncer, who gets in and who doesn't. But if I consume something and I accept it, which is a lot easier when I'm consuming something from a charismatic leader, you see where I'm going, and I accept it, over time, it will be it. It will be it. So a primer and requirement for a cult to work, this is another one. And I want you to be in observation here. Another primer and requirement for a cult to work, if you set out and you want to start a cult today, you need people that are at crossroads in their life and lost. It helps them open up to new ideas. When somebody's at a crossroads in life and they're struggling, now here, if you want to start an interesting business model, make sure it's one thing to have supply and demand, right? You're going to supply a demand. That's a basic premise of business. But if the demand has urgency behind it because people are struggling in life, oh boy, and they're at crossroads in their life and you're supplying what it is that they're looking for, you're not only going to get customers, you're going to get lifetime customers. So this brings you to fall in love. By the way, this is why people fall in love with divine leaders, even when they're talking about nonsense. We saw this happen in with what's the hot yoga guy? I forget what his name is. It's escaping my mind. But all these people went and started taking hot yoga. Anyway, somebody can tell me what it's called. Maybe somebody can throw it in the comments. But either way, people started following the leader, and he started doing some crazy shit. But people followed him, and if you looked at all those people, they started the process because they were at crossroads in their life, right? Bikram yoga. Now, once again, I don't know if all that's true. I saw a show on it, and I just found the concept of it fascinating. But it all leads back to this cult idea. So this brings you to fall in love with that divine leader, followed by the acknowledgement of who the leader's enemy is. So if I fall in love with the divine leader because I'm at a crossroads, when I noticed myself, I remember when I was 80 pounds overweight, going through a divorce and all that stuff, I was at a crossroads in my life. I remember I was like, I can't go on like this. So when I went on my program, this is 14 years ago, and I started to wake up and get healthy, I became vulnerable probably to anybody that led that program. So my mentor was the guy that created that program. So it would have been very easy for me to just dedicate my whole life to him. And I want to talk about leadership in a second. But I'm bringing this to your conscious part of your mind right now, but you can understand how that happens. So it's pretty easy to be a cult leader, right? But if I get enamored by a leader and the leader tells me something that's bad, I'm going to think it's bad too, right? And that's not decided by me. That's decided by my leader. Now, go back to your childhood. Who's your leader? Your parents, right? Your mother, your father, your teacher, your preacher. And there's a new leader out there, and it's called society, right? And comparative reality and all that stuff. So if I'm consuming stuff from my mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, the highlight reel, and accepting it over time, well, that's going to get me a little monkey brained, isn't it? Especially if I'm at a crossroads. So the crossroads concept is larger than ever right now, right? Because in this new culture with social media and sedentary lifestyle and loneliness, there's a lot of people at crossroads right now grasping for a string, looking for someone to hand them a branch, right? So if you're a leader out there, be aware of this stuff. It's very fragile, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So this is just an observation. We could say that the new cult leaders are now on, and they're probably unconscious to it, and if they're conscious to it, that's fucked up. But they're on YouTube and social media, and they're personal growth and self-discovery experts, including me, right? Now, we haven't said that cult leaders are bad. We're just using that terminology. So this is why I remind people once again that when I finish speaking, it's like I teach people how to go, When I do my talk in Colorado, it's first slide. It says, huh. And I teach people what that is. And I say to them, when we're done with my presentation, just as I'm going to invite all of you to do today, when we're done, oh, thank you, Julie, and on Clubhouse said Vikram. You can always count on Julie. But at the end of my presentations, I tell people in the beginning, I go, when I'm done, I don't want you to stand up and applaud. If you want to, you can. I'll enjoy it. I want you to end by saying, meaning you'll think about it, not openly accept it. So that's why I teach that concept of cognitive distancing and that technique, right? So the concept of that is, just as a reminder, to slow the knee-jerk programming response down and look at things with a logical and rational mind. So remember, you have these things called beliefs, and if you hear someone speak and their system or what they're telling you vibes with your belief system and your core values, and you're at a crossroads, you're vulnerable. So your beliefs, remember, are on autopilot. Sometimes we don't even know. If I ask people, what are your beliefs? It takes some time. They have to think about it, but they have them. They're on autopilot and they're stored in that hippocampus, right? And the hippocampus is always waiting to validate fears and threats that trigger a response. So let's say I see somebody running around with a tambourine, and I call them a cult, right? That's because my amygdala sees it and gets frightened, checks in with my hippocampus and my beliefs that I've created based on all my consumption, and my knee jerk, if I don't slow it down, is to say cult, right? So that response prevents you from growing. If you don't distance yourself, it prevents you from growing. Remember Viktor Frankl, the space in between the stimulus and the response is where we grow. So that response prevents you from growing and creating. So this makes you a follower. And when you're a follower, you have little chance of being or becoming the dominant force in your life and becoming a leader. So ask somebody, say, so what's your goal in life? To follow? Or would you like to one day become a leader? The drum major instinct, as Martin Luther King talked about. Well, if you're going to follow for the rest of your life, you're not going to lead. You're not going to get into that growth space and create. So I think it's dangerous when a leader, and I'm always cognizant of this, because sometimes if I get on stage in front of thousands of people, I could be enamored and looked at this way. So I think about it. I think it's dangerous when a leader speaks with a goal in their minds to get people to buy into it and follow. Now, I can understand from a business aspect, if I want you to buy my book, I want you to believe that what I'm saying is of value, and then I'm going to close you and get you to go buy the book. But we just have to be careful, because there's something else going on there. Some people might start following you, which might make you happy, but if somebody spends the rest of their life following you, they're never going to become a leader, right? So in fact, I've come full circle now in my business. This is where I'm at. And when somebody works with me, this is what they get now. I've come full circle in my business as a leader of thousands of people, high responsibility, to redefine what a leader is. It's no longer somebody that has followers. I used to think that if you had followers, you were a leader. Isn't that interesting? And I bet you a lot of other people thought that too. Right? How do you become a leader? Well, you got to do something and provide content, and then look at your followers and your likes and your comments, or turn around your head and see if people are following you, like Rocky running through the streets of Philadelphia, right? So here's my new concept. I think a true leader leads others to become leaders. So I'm not afraid of the word cult, but I want to redefine it. If I am building a cult and I'm leading you, what I really should be doing is leading you to build your own cult or your own leadership, where you'll train and pay it forward and help other people, right? So fascinating. So my observation of followers, meaning people that don't, here's what I determine of followers. Those that don't want to lead, or are not ready, or don't know that they can, right? And they've decided that they prefer to follow. That's a safe thing to do, right? That keeps you away from failure. That keeps you away from overwhelm. So that's what a follower is. Somebody that consciously says, I'm a follower, I'm going to be a follower. Or I say, I'm just going to follow for a little bit, right? It's just that. So when individuals are either afraid or overwhelmed by the idea of creating something on their own, taking their own path, it's very hard when you're in the herd. The herd is all going this way. It's almost like a stampede. It's hard to get out of a stampede, right? To take a left instead of a right in this world, it's scary. You got to do the work, right? So I understand it. Creating something on your own, they often select a leader that they resonate with and simply follow them. Think about it. If I wake up and I'm scared of overwhelm, of, all those things, right? If I'm scared of failure, overwhelm, risk, and all that stuff, but I still want to move forward, I have a choice to do nothing or follow a leader. I'm going to follow the leader before I do nothing, probably, right? And by the way, if you're doing nothing, you're the leader that you're following. So this unconsciously gets people out of responsibility to create things on their own, to take responsibility of leading others to lead, not follow. So, but this requires an awakening on all sides that everything and everyone has interesting things to say and different vantage points. It's very important to know that about yourself and to know that about other people when you're contemplating all this stuff. Allowing yourself to view them. I don't know what that says. Sometimes I write things that don't make any sense, but allowing yourself to view them and your own thoughts and think neutrally, like Spock. That's the solution, right? So a big part of what I teach is to just look at the world, change the way you look at things you look at change, right? So if you start looking at your thoughts, your feelings, and other people, and you just go, right? Very interesting. And by the way, this morning, I realized that there's another version of Like if I go, that means I'm thinking about it and I'm not sure. Give me some time. But there's another version, I go, And if I do it that way, it means like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I have to be careful of that one, right? It's more of a rather than a Yes, you're all thinking I'm crazy. So in closing, I think cults are great, right? If you think they are, right? And another thing is if you think cults are crazy, then you're right. And remember what I think, everybody's right. And nobody ever got anything for being right. So not because it's right, because you think it's right. And I also recognize that whatever I think is right is what's right to me. It's what's right now. So perhaps today's Rise Up was another attempt to offer an expanded perspective of how we form judgment on things that are different than our things. But at the end of the day, it's just all really a bunch of things, right? And it's fun to just look at things as things, not as things that are. So what's your thing? Hey, that's a cool thing, is my response when you tell me. So thanks for sharing. I'll think about it. I'll think about your thing and see how it supports or doesn't support my thing. That's the concept. So great to be with you. So yeah, a little bit crazy today, but I think the point is across. I enjoy this topic very, very much, and I invite. I'm very, very open to speaking to radical people, and I'm very, very careful to not put them in a position where they might feel uncomfortable. But I do say a lot. And it's interesting whenever you tell me something with an exclamation point and I just say, you either appreciate that I'm listening and I'll think about it, or you get upset with me that I didn't give you an opinion right away, which indicates that you wanted me to buy into it. It's interesting. So love and appreciate you all. That's my Rise Up today. Wow, we went almost 40 minutes today. That's longer than normal. Follow me on Instagram, Rise Up with Dragon. Streaming this live only now for the rest of it to my Rise Up with Dragon fan page. Right, you can follow that. That's been advised by my peeps. And also you can follow me on Instagram at Makes Sense, and our website is Rise Up with Dragon. Get on the wait list for the 15 Days of Discipline, and a lot of exciting stuff coming. Love and appreciate you all, and we will see you on Friday.